The history of our planet is written in carbon. Billions of years ago, as Earth cooled from a fiery birth, its atmosphere was dominated by carbon dioxide, deadly to life as we know it. But a primitive organism found a way. Powered by sunlight, it thrived on the carbon and released oxygen, cleansing the planet's air. With life came death and decay, burying the carbon deep in the earth. For eons, it remained locked in rocks and soil. The 18th century, the discovery of the ancient carbon fueled a revolution. Economies thrived, but with unforeseen consequences.
An alarming new report shows a record-breaking amount of CO2 in our atmosphere.
This is the highest concentration of CO2 the Earth has seen in over...
Scientists from around the globe saying today there is...
The Arctic ice caps are melting at the fastest rate.
Extreme weather becoming
sea level. Time running out to prevent the worst impacts of climate change.
Only by removing the CO2 that is already in the atmosphere can we prevent catastrophic climate change now. So I created the concept of carbon negative power plants. Now you can grow the economy, create jobs, create exports, and clean the atmosphere of the planet. I see the whole world economy based on carbon now, not petroleum, CO2. The basic goods that humans need for survival are food, without which we won't survive for more than a few weeks, water, without which we cannot survive for more than a few days, and air, without which we cannot survive for more than a few minutes. We need to value them. If we don't value them, they won't be there. And if they're not there, we will not survive. By 2009, I knew that we had delayed reducing carbon emissions so long that now it wasn't sufficient to reduce the emissions and the burning of fossil fuels. We actually had to take out, remove what was already out there in the atmosphere. So I worked with the United Nations for many years and created the carbon market of the Kyoto Protocol, which became international law in 2005, but it was never ratified by the US.
Despite legislation, the climate crisis remained unresolved. And Graciela realized the solution had to come from the economy.
If by cleaning the atmosphere and selling the CO2, we make more money than the cost of removing the CO2, then you have a commercial feasibility. And why should that be important? Because that will change the global economy. Because everybody wants to make money. Because we no longer depend on governments or on United Nations. It depends on the motive for profit, which is well distributed and well accepted. Even though the economists have to change the economy for climate change to be resolved, you need technology to do that. And the technology is physics and chemistry. I met Peter for the first time in 1996, when he left Princeton University to come to Columbia University to lead the Earth Institute that I was supposed to lead. So that was not a very good, propitious encounter with Peter Eisenberger. Peter Eisenberger quickly recognized that what was needed is a combination of economic as well as physical tools and innovations. So there was a natural collaboration between Peter Eisenberger and myself.
The key notion was to close the carbon cycle. And I still remember the day when you said to me that we should form a company to try to do this. And I said, we don't know how to do it. How can we form a company to do it?
The urgent need to remove carbon from the air was clear to Graciela. The question was, could it be done in an economical way?
The notion of taking CO2 out of the air seems improbable to many people because we've been struggling to take it out of the flue gas from our power plants. The first challenge one meets to see if this is feasible is to be able to move 3,000 times as much air as the amount of CO2 you collect, because the CO2 is only 400 parts per million. It's very dilute in the air. And after a long search, we discovered that the catalytic converter of your car, which is this device here, known as a monolith contactor, is the exact device we needed to do this. Up here, there's 640 of these devices. There's a fan behind it that's pushing the air through it.
The air goes through. It has little cells. The little cells are impregnated with a proprietary sorbent.
Need an agent in the walls of this thing that the CO2 is going to contact that will pick it up, not pick up the oxygen, not pick up the nitrogen, just selectively pick up the CO2.
When the air finishes, it's clean. This captures the CO2, but that's half of the process. Now you have to release it. To release it, you apply heat, 85 degrees centigrade, less than what you need to boil a cup of tea.
And there's lots of waste heat. I knew from my days at Exxon that the world is awash in waste heat, and that would make the process not only less energy consumptive, but it'd be heat that we're already not using, and therefore would really reduce the cost of this technology.
And what do you do with the CO2? You sell it for water desalination, bubbles for beverages, greenhouses, producing carbon fibers, dry ice, polymers or plastics that are renewable, synthetic fuels. All of that is a market that is $1 trillion, and it's a very hungry market for CO2. And therefore the whole process generates a world economy where the more you produce, the more you export, the more jobs you create, the cleaner is the atmosphere. It's almost impossible to believe until you start thinking that it's not different from the discovery of oil as the basis for the economy over 100 years ago. Instead of throwing CO2 into the atmosphere, now you use CO2 to make money. So this is the CO2 economy, this is the carbon economy. We are replacing petroleum by CO2.
For over 75 years, our region has been the leader of the oil and gas industry. In this new era, renewables and hydrocarbons enjoy a truly symbiotic relationship that is reshaping the economics of energy. And nowhere is this paradigm shift more true or relevant than here in this part of the world.
I think the oil and gas industry understands that they are subject to enormous social and economic forces. For the first time, there is a future where the oil and gas industry is not dominating and has a different role. They have become the most volatile of all sectors of the economy. The CO2 molecule is as important now as petroleum was in the last century. Instead of farming petroleum from the soil, we take the CO2 from the atmosphere. We farm, literally, the sky. And the reason there is such a huge demand for CO2 is because there is very limited supply, very high capture cost of the traditional technologies, and it's very difficult to transport. Our technology requires no transportation and is the lowest cost. It's so low cost that when we sell the CO2 that we farm from the sky, we make money, a lot of money.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I really can't understand, and I think it is too good to be true that you can take the CO2 back and manufacture it. It is too good to be true to me, and I like to.
Anything transformational has a propensity to be considered unrealistic, because people say, if this is so good and it can be done, why hasn't it happened? That's the question they're asking. The answer is simple. The Wright brothers got tired of debating with engineers about whether planes can fly or not. It was a theoretical scientific discussion that took years. And the Wright brothers said, you know what, let's just fly, right? And they did. The interesting part of the story is what happened next. Even though the Wright brothers flew a plane, therefore laying down to rest this scientific debate of whether you can fly a plane or it is too heavy to fly, for 7 years after the first flight, the Wright brothers were faced with people saying that flying was impossible. And that's why it takes so long, because in the case of climate change, it was not just somebody flying a plane. I wish it was flying a plane. So easy as that. Well, it's an incredibly difficult problem to solve, because you have to clean the atmosphere of the planet. Just think about it. It's an enormous task. You need 30 to 40,000 global thermostat plant in order to clean every year all the CO2 that humans emit by burning fossil fuels, which is approximately 40 billion tons. If we start right now, the production of 40,000 global thermostat units or other technologies that will do the same thing, in 20 to 30 years, we'll be able to remove all the CO2 that humans emit each year. Do we have time? Touch and go. Big innovation and big change is not easy. And it takes time for people to understand, to appreciate, and to learn how to use change. We're still learning with climate change. And I hope we learn fast enough that we don't destroy the Earth and the atmosphere that we share with other species and our own species in the process. So I'm talking about the new economy in which instead of burning fossil fuels, you are cleaning the atmosphere, and out of that you create the fuel for economic growth. But will it happen? Yes, because if it doesn't happen, we won't be here to tell the story. It has to happen.